The European Union is demanding an additional £900 million from the UK. It comes as the largest public spending cut since the Second World War was announced. Thousands of protesters took to the streets of London, saying it'll condemn the UK to years of brutal unemployment. Well, for more on this, I'm now joined from London by Robert Olds. He's director of think tank The Bruges Group. Thanks very much indeed for joining us there in London. Now, the European Union wants an extra £900 million from the UK. As we know, the British Prime Minister is very unhappy with that request. But is it a fair order from the EU?
Certainly not. At a time when in Britain we're having to cut back public spending by almost 20%, the EU wants more money from British taxpayers, money we can't afford. We're having to cut our cloth to suit our needs, and the European Union should do the same. We shouldn't be handing extra money to the EU.
What do you make of the timing of this? As we're saying that the UK has announced the biggest cut since the Second World War. What do you make of the actual timing of this request from the EU?
Well, the timing is astounding, really, when, you know, as we are making these cuts in Britain to pay off the enormous debt that we've been left. Having to give more money to the EU is just money that the British taxpayer, the British government, cannot afford to give. It shouldn't be giving this money to the European Union. Our contributions are set to rise. The EU accounts haven't been signed off in over 15 years because there's so much fraud, waste and mismanagement within the European Union. We just shouldn't be giving this money at all.
Well, what do you mean by that, fraud and mismanagement? In what way is the EU wasting money?
Well, the European Union's own Court of Auditors haven't signed off their accounts in over 15 years now because the money that member states give to the European Union isn't properly accounted for. They don't really know where most of the money goes. It's riddled with errors, and we suspect that a lot of the money is being wasted and, of course, goes on fraud. That's the European Union's own Court of Auditors which has said that, and it won't sign off the accounts. If it was a company that hadn't had its accounts signed off in over 15 years, the directors would be struck off or even perhaps in prison. The European Union, the money just goes and we're not sure where it goes. And really, we can't afford to hand over the money, even if it was properly accounted for.
Well, of course, members of the European Parliament would vehemently deny all that, and they'll say, look, this is a time of crisis, Europe should be rallying together. They've described this as an investment and a good tool for fighting the crisis. So surely that's enough justification, isn't it? They're actually throwing money at the problem to unite Europe.
No, the money is going on largely on administrative costs, on more EU propaganda, more better conditions for the bureaucrats within Brussels who haven't been elected yet make laws that govern the whole of the European Union. Really, there is a time of crisis and there's a time of pressure on taxpayer, a pressure on government debt. That's the crisis that we're facing, and the wrong way of solving that is to give more money to the wasteful European Union.
Could Britain refuse to pay up?
Britain shouldn't be paying this money. We should pay up. Margaret Thatcher in the early 1980s said we don't accept the money that we're handing over to the EU. We want a proportion of our money back. The British government should do the same if it had the courage.
Can I just ask you briefly, and finally, your group has asked for a complete restructuring of the UK's relationship with other European countries. What do you actually mean by that? Do you mean actually pulling out of the EU and having nothing to do with the EU and having a completely different system? I mean, what are you calling for?
Well, the European Union has gone too far. European Union laws take supremacy over British law, over the laws of every member state within the European Union. And we've worked out that it causes a lot of damage economically. We're overburdened with regulation as well as handing too much money to Brussels. Really, British law in Britain should be sovereign. Our own laws, our own politicians at Westminster should have precedence over those in Brussels. That's what we want to see. We want to see a Europe of nation states that can work and cooperate together, but not be governed by the institutions of the European Union based in Brussels, which no one has ever elected, and can force legislation on the citizens of the EU.
Robert Olds, thank you very much indeed for your analysis and your viewpoint on that. Thank you. That's the director of think tank The Bruges Group, joining us live there in London. We appreciate your time.